What's up, Degenerate Nation? Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by BetMGM. This is the college basketball bracket reveal and analysis show. I'm Stuckey, and joining me tonight are two co-hosts, BJ Cunningham and the one and only Mr. Jim Root. Gentlemen, we finally have a bracket that we will obsess over the next 3 days, watch lines. It's going to be a long 3 days, so I'm happy to bring the people some content to fill up that time. There is no longer morning than the Thursday morning before the first tip. It is truly Christmas morning for degenerates and adults. Mr. Root, how you feeling?
I'm good. Well, that's why you got to be in Pacific time that day, because then you can almost roll out of bed into hoops, get it at 9 a.m. That's
Dad,
better
you
than
can't
having to wait
sleep the
until
night
noon.
before. You can't sleep the night before you're staring out your window, waiting to see if Santa's coming. There's no way to sleep.
But if you sleep, it comes faster. That's what it is.
Yeah, I try to sleep. I can't. BJ, how you feeling?
I'm feeling great. I was just talking with Jim beforehand. I'm like, I don't know, in terms of filling out my bracket, we'll obviously get to each region, but I'm like, I think I might just have to take all the number one seeds to make the Final Four because I don't think anybody is going to take those because I like way too many upsets here in the first round. But yeah, I mean, you can see a lot of the spreads too are very, very close with a lot of these, upset type 5-12, 6-11 type matchups. But it's setting up to be a very, very chaotic tournament.
Yeah, well, we said that's a wide open year, and then we had a conference tournament week where didn't I get so many one seeds won? I think it was like the most amount of one seeds. So
yeah,
maybe that's not the worst approach. But yeah, we're going to go through every region here. We'll talk through who we potentially like to come out of it, just initial reactions, right? Where these are subject to change because during the week we will have two more previews. We'll go through one for Thursday and another episode for Friday. We also had our live bracket reveal show that's already out on Twitter. So if you missed that, make sure you check it out. So let's go through region by region here. Let's start with where do you want to start? I think we should start with the West. Let's start with the West. Jim, you're out in Vegas, right?
Oh, yeah.
This is the Vegas regional. I think when this first came out, my first reaction was the West is absolutely loaded. All right, you have Kansas, which was known as a 1 seed. I mean, you can go down. You could say St. Mary's is a 5. Analytically, their profile is a top 10 to 15 team. TCU is a 6. When healthy, you could argue they're a top 10 team. All right, you have UCLA as a 2. Going into Sunday or Saturday night, if they won that game, they were probably a 1. You have Gonzaga 3. They're peaking at the right time. I mean, this conference is loaded. You take Arkansas as an 8 with 3 potential first-round draft picks. This region is, and then UConn 4, arguably a top 10 team as well. This region is just loaded from top to bottom. High-level thoughts on this region and who you might like to come out of it. Jim, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would have been all UCLA here if Jalen Clark was healthy, but I do think that's going to limit them a little bit, not having that kind of athleticism, defender, slasher, gives them another gear. So then you look elsewhere and kind of trying to figure out as we go here, like Gonzaga's playing so well lately. The last month, their offense has been just a complete volcano. Like they just score 1.3 points per possession on everybody. But they've got a potentially awesome second round matchup with TCU. BJ and I were talking about it before we started recording. Like that game could be in the 90s for sure. Going to be a track meet. Both teams love to go.
Feels like it should be an Elite 8 game, that game.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's going to be round 2. One of those teams not making the Sweet 16. And I guess they could get upset early too. Maybe one of them goes down. But yeah, I'm probably going to go with somebody not in the top seeding. I probably will not pick Kansas. I think I'm going to stray away from UCLA. I might stubbornly go with TCU because of what I think they can be when they're fully healthy. Lampkin's away from the team. They still dominated K-State, but then couldn't handle Texas. So that's, kind of not ideal, not having Lampkin in there as their physical identity. But I think I'm leaning Horned Frogs here, BJ. What do you think?
Yeah, I I agree that I mean that Gonzaga TCU game that could maybe decide who's going to go to the Elite Eight. Obviously, because UCLA, like you mentioned, lost Jalen Clark, and it kind of limits what they can do defensively and also offensively as well. I like UConn to come out of this region. Like, Kansas has obviously been playing very, very well. They obviously got punked by Texas in the final. That whoever they play, Arkansas or Illinois, is a big time landmine game for Kansas, because both of those teams throughout the season were, preseason, even early on, were near the top 25 and have obviously the talent to compete with Kansas. But UConn should be able to get past Iona, and then it's a very tricky matchup against St. Mary's or VCU. But I mean, this UConn team is really peaking at the right time. Now they're up to 6th in just offensive efficiency, to the best offensive rebounding team in the country. And, one of your Kai tweeted this a while ago, and I think it reigns very true, is that when UConn is hitting shots and they're able to play physical and basically just dominate teams on the offensive glass, they're close to unbeatable. So if we get that version of UConn, I think that they're a very, very dangerous team and can make the Final Four. But yeah, I guess my pick will come out of this region will be UConn.
Yeah, the thing I worry about UConn is, so they have an interesting draw in that they start off with Iona, a team that is going to pressure you, and they also could face VCU in the second round, another team that can really pressure you. They grade out around average in press offense, but they have turnover issues. So that's a little scary. Then if you get Mary's, elite defensive rebounding team, elite post defense, you got to hit mid-range shots against them. Do you trust the UConn guards to do that? But before we get to that, I just want to, on the bottom half, UCLA worries me a bit against TCU. Now we don't know if Bone is going to be healthy either, but UCLA an elite transition defense, and that game might turn into a grinder, which we saw with TCU, and I think they'll really miss Lampkin in that case. So that scares me a little bit. If that game, UCLA just turns that into a half court game, that would scare me for TCU. But I do love the matchup against Gonzaga, because Gonzaga's rim defense is weak and they can be exploited there. And TCU is at its best, right? Gonzaga's great in transition, but arguably TCU is the best transition offense in all of college basketball. And that game will be up and down, and that is how TCU wants to play. But let's start with the most intriguing matchup of the first round. I think a lot of people in my mentions have already, said this is going to be an upset. VCU St. Mary's. This is a really interesting matchup to me. You have, Ace Baldwin, who can get hot in the mid-range, right? That's what you need to do against St. Mary's. They're going to funnel you into the mid-range. And we saw St. Mary's, they have good guards. They don't have turnover issues, but they struggle with the press against Gonzaga, who used it, Boise State at the end. So this is VCU wants to make this game just wild. St. Mary's wants to slow it down, run their pick and roll. But how do you see this playing out, Jimmy? Are you worried about St. Mary's against the press? Because they've shown some cracks there of late.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, Aiden Mahaney's great, but he is a freshman and could potentially have a little bit of a whoa factor going against a team as athletic as VCU. There's not a ton of that in the WCC, not a team that pressures quite like that. So I think that is definitely an element that could be bad news for St. Mary's. I just think they're going to force VCU into such tough shots. I know you said that, they funnel them into the mid-range. VCU's been better this year when they make threes, which, okay, of course, duh. But they're not a great shooting team. And if they're taking tougher mid-range jumpers instead of open threes, which is what St. Mary's surrenders, that's really a problem. I think that eventually St. Mary's is going to wear them down in that game. I would actually go with the favorite there. And I was surprised how short the line is. Only 3.5 on that game. I thought it'd be, something like 5.5. So I definitely lean towards St. Mary's there.
BJ, get your thoughts on an interesting matchup in the bottom half of the region in Northwestern and Boise State. I've seen some people say that they like Northwestern already, but I actually really like Boise State, and I'll state my case. I'm curious to get your thoughts. Now, it's tough to trust Mountain West teams. I don't think they've won a game since 2018 in the actual tournament, but Northwestern, if you look at their profile, I think that they just really thrived in the Big Ten, right? Their defense was built to stop the post offenses in the Big Ten, which is smart because there's a lot of great post offenses in the Big Ten. Boise State's not that. They don't run their offense through the post. And then Boise State on the other end, their weakness is their post D, right? They lack size, and Northwestern doesn't really run their offense through the post at all. Boise State has the shooters. They have the defensive versatility. And I think this game should be a grinder, which I think favors Boise State. They're not great in transition. They're really good in the half court. They have shooters all over, and they lack depth. You see them wear down with a lot of games. So I don't think that's a concern here against Northwestern. So I think Northwestern outside of the Big Ten, this isn't the best matchup for them, but curious to get your thoughts there, or if you want to go elsewhere in another matchup.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really like Boise State. If you want to read about our live reactions, I wrote about this one for the NCAA tournament, but the Northwestern offense, they just haven't been shooting the ball well all season long. And like you said, yeah, they've been pretty reliant on, a post-heavy Big Ten. And it's funny because, they get the number 2 seed in the Big Ten, but what was it? If things would have broke the wrong way, they could have ended up being an 8 or 9 seed in the Big Ten tournament. So it really just changes the perception on them. But I mean, they're 320th in effective field goal percentage. They can't shoot from inside the arc. They can't shoot from outside the arc. And then Boise, I mean, they're a top 20 defensive rebounding team. They're top 70 in free throw rate allowed. So if Northwestern gets cold from the field, that's a big time problem when you're playing Boise. And Boise is a very high frequency pick and roll team as well. That's something Northwestern has struggled to defend in the Big Ten. So I agree with you. I think this is a fantastic matchup here for Boise. Like, it's going to be a rock fight. These are 2 top 15 defensive efficiency teams, and Boise is just barely inside the top 100 offensively, with Northwestern being outside the top 100. So I agree with you. I think this is a great Boise State spot and a great matchup for them. Unless Northwestern essentially just has to get hot from the field, which they've shown they have not that great of an ability to do so this year.
Yeah, a lot of it comes out of, can they slow down the dribble penetration of Bo Buie? Do you want to play devil's advocate there, Jim, or do you agree?
No, I tend to agree. I've talked about a little bit with our fellow Weavers about the Mountain West teams. I think they're 0-9 against the spread last 9. That conference in the NCAA tournament, not very good. But this version of the Mountain West is better offensively than in past years. Like, usually it's just teams that grind out rock fights and that's it. They get to the big dance and they don't have any offensive upside. But like Boise, Utah State, San Diego State, all of them have like real offensive prowess. They've got more shooting than they've had in the past. I think that Mountain West trend is going to get debunked this year because I like the teams better. So I also like that matchup for Boise.
Anything else? Any other first round matchups? Jim, I'll start with you. Do you want to call out in the first round? Arkansas, Illinois. Who's going to? That's the one. Who's going to miss more? Who's going to miss more threes in that game is the question.
I'm very curious some of these SEC teams going into the tournament because, like I just said, with the Mountain West, they're better offensively. Well, no one in the SEC can shoot. 32nd out of 32 conferences this year in 3-point percentage. So they've been able to defend a certain way all through league play. Arkansas is like this. Texas A&M is like this. They give up a ton of threes. And now you might be playing a team that can actually shoot. Well, they actually got a good matchup here because Illinois is not that deadly from downtown. They love to chuck them, but they're not that efficient. They don't really get downhill well off the bounce. That one's more a talent level game for me. I think Arkansas has just got slightly higher talent level with Nick Smith back in there. I will probably be on the must bus in round 1, that 8-9 game.
Yeah, I was looking at Illinois today, and they make no sense because they're, they led the Big Ten in 2-point offense and 2-point defense. They can't shoot from 3 unless like Matthew Myers hitting like his step backs and gets hot for a stretch. But they just continue to chuck up threes. They also are better in the half court. They're very inefficient in transition, yet they continue to just try to run. Like, they don't have a plan, it seems like. I think that Underwood doesn't know what to do with his team. So, yeah, I'm really unimpressed with Illinois. And, Arkansas needs to get to the rim. Illinois' 2-point defense has been good, but I agree. I think too much talent there. PJ, anything else you want to mention in the West?
Yeah, I was just going to stick with that Illinois-Arkansas game. The thing about Illinois, and it's very, very weird because like they finish at the rim at an incredibly high rate as well. Arkansas is very used to defending at the rim, playing in the SEC with not a lot of teams shooting very many 3-pointers. So yeah, it's totals at 144. Obviously both these teams like to run, so the pace is going to get up there. But yeah, I wish we could get like a field goal percentage over under bet. That'd be a fun one to bet in this type of game to see what it would be. But yeah, no, I agree. That's going to be I think whoever wins that game is going to give Kansas quite a bit of problems in the second round.
Yeah, I think Arkansas in particular would give Kansas a lot of issues. Do you agree with that, Jim?
Yeah, for sure. Just a team that can play up in talent level. We've seen Musselman do really well in this format, game planning quickly with the turnarounds, made two straight Elite Eights, and they're just kind of a malleable team. They have the bigger wings that can guard Jalen Wilson, Dick, and McCullough, and that's kind of been Kansas' advantage all years. You don't have three guys big enough and fast enough to guard them, but Arkansas actually has the bodies to match up there.
Yeah. I mean, Illinois might get to the line a bunch. They even struggle from the free throw line. They're outside the top 300. All right, let's move on to so I'm going to call the West is the best region. That's the best regional. And then let's go on the other side of the bracket to the East, which I'm calling the least regional, which is your New York region. Polar opposites. I mean, when I look at the East, so I look at the West and I just went through, oh my God, look at the 5 and the 6 seeds and the 4. I think that they're all underseeded. And I think in the East, it's the opposite. I think everyone is overseeded, right? You could even argue Marquette. They had a great run last weekend. They probably should be like a 3. Your 4 seeds, Tennessee, who lost, arguably their most important guard, and they're very limited offensively. Duke is hot at the right time. Kentucky is, who knows what you're going to get with them. And you have Memphis and FAU are both intriguing teams that can make deep runs. And you match them up against each other in the first round, which makes the region even easier. Then Purdue is, I think, a vulnerable one. I mean, Zach Edey is incredible, but their guards are young and raw. And if they get Memphis, and everyone was talking about this before the bracket came out and ended up coming to fruition, Memphis's athleticism, and FAU in a certain extent too, that'll be an incredible game to watch. Very entertaining, Memphis FAU. But Memphis, that the press, their athleticism, physicality, and then their ability to defend the post, and the way that they're playing right now is going to give Purdue a lot of issues. I'm petrified that there's going to be no value in Memphis because everyone is talking about that. So let's start at the top. And maybe Painter has to go to that like athletic veteran lineup, right, that he'd had to do against Rutgers when Rutgers' physicality was giving their young guards issues. Might have to do that here. But, Jim, let's start at the top. Number one, does Memphis get by FAU? And then do either one of those teams upset Purdue? Does one have a better shot? So let's focus on that very top of the region.
I think both of them have a chance against Purdue for sure. Memphis for the reasons you said, and then FAU has an actual 7-foot big man who can kind of compete a little bit with Edey, and then offensively, FAU is going to spread them out big time. They're going to force Edey to guard in space, a lot of 4-out stuff with ball screen action. Everybody on their roster can shoot other than their center. So like they have 4 shooters, 4 creators on the floor at all times. Between Memphis and FAU, though, that's the tough one. I want to pick whoever that is to beat Purdue, but having to choose between them is where I'm having a real conundrum. I'll probably end up.
There's always one of these every 1 or 2 of these in the bracket every year. It's like, all right, I don't know who's going to win this 8-9, but whoever does, I think they're going to beat the 1. So what do? Do you advance the 1? Do you take a stance on the 8? Like it's a lot of game theory there.
Yep. I will probably land on the Owls just because I do think that offense is kind of what can unlock a super athletic defense like Memphis is, but I don't feel great about it at all. It does help that the FAU has a bunch of ball handlers, like I said, against Memphis athleticism, but that is a tricky one. That is a tricky one indeed, BJ.
Yeah, no, it is definitely is. Like you mentioned, like FAU's got 3 shooters that are shooting over 38% from 3-point range, which is crazy. Memphis has been a decent 3-point defense, so it's going to be very, very back and forth. The one area, Memphis has been a very poor defensive rebounding team this season. So if FAU can that will be their main advantage to get by them. But yeah, I think either of these teams can give Purdue a ton of problems. And, even going down the bracket a little bit, like Duke it's very interesting. Like if Duke gets past Oral Roberts, I almost feel like good about their chances of making the Final Four. But I feel horrible about their first round matchup against Oral Roberts, if that makes any sense. So yeah, I mean, there's just landmines all over for Purdue. It looks easy on paper, being in the easiest region, but I mean, we've said it all season long that this is a completely vulnerable team. that it's just right for an upset. So yeah, I'll probably be, like you said, so I hope that we can get a good number on whether it be Memphis or FAU against Purdue. But yeah, I'm definitely picking Purdue to probably not even make the Elite Eight in this region.
FAU, by the way, 91st percentile per synergy and post-up defense. Memphis, 93rd percentile. So both of those teams can defend the post. Both of those teams have a lot of bodies, too, that you can throw out there for fouls. I think they're both a top 50 in bench minutes. Now, it gets a little dicey for FAU, I would imagine, because they just come at you in waves. I mean, they're top scorers, I think, doesn't even start. But if Golden gets in foul trouble, right, and that's always going to be a big it's so hard to officiate Edey games, right? So does Golden pick up a couple fouls early on? Does he not? Or even vice versa. But yeah, the Duke Oral Roberts game will probably be the most talked about game of the first round. Duke is peaking right now. Their defense looks incredible. And now you could play devil's advocate and say, well, it's the ACC, and it's very down. You look at who they beat. Even Miami lost their interior player in that game, Mir. And Oral Roberts has the nation's longest winning streak. I think it's 17 games. Max Asmus has been here before. Their defense is even better than it was when they had that run. Connor Vanover, pick and pop guy with all their ball screens. They're not relying on the boards, which is big against Duke because Duke will dominate there. Does Asmus have enough here? I took the 7 for some that I could get down earlier. I feel like it's un-American not to take Oral Roberts in this matchup against Duke, but I do think that they can give Duke some issues. It's a matter of like, how much do you believe in Duke? And I think that they're improved significantly. How much of it is just, look, they're great and they obviously have a lot of talent, but was some of it just the down nature of the ACC? Jim, how do you think that matchup plays out? Really fascinating game. Can't wait to watch that one.
Yeah, I think that's the big part of it. The fact that they're going through an ACC it's not that strong, and you get two shorthanded teams in the semis and the finals. So as much as it looks like, holy cow, Duke is really taking off at the right time, it's also something of the opposite where, it's vulnerable competition that they've done a great job of taking advantage of. I kind of think Oral Roberts fights that game too. I will be taking the dog there. I don't love the number. I thought maybe it'd be a little bit higher. I'm thinking that a lot with some of the dogs.
I say 2015 anymore.
Yeah, unfortunately. I wish we were getting better numbers on the dogs, but definitely lean that way. I think they're kind of like FAU, where they just everybody on the floor can shoot at all times. They have 5 guys on the court constantly that can shoot. And that's going to give Duke a little bit of problems. I don't think Lively's used to playing on the perimeter that much. He's been a great shot blocker, especially down the stretch, but not sure how comfortable he is moving around on the perimeter against guys like Vanover. It's trendy, but I'm going to ride with Oral Roberts there too.
Yes. In the bottom half of that region in the East, you have Kentucky against Providence in the Bryce Hopkins revenge game, and then Kansas State, Montana State. I don't know what to expect from Kentucky. You could tell me they're going to the Final Four or they're going to lose to Providence. I'd believe either. I can't figure out that team, and I'm very close to them, and nobody I know can figure them out. But I think Montana State can give Kansas State a lot of issues. I really like them against the number. Here's why. I mean, Kansas State thrived at home. They just weren't the same team away from home. Montana State has excellent individual defenders who can match up with that Kansas State backcourt. Darius Brown, Big Sky Defensive Player of the Year. Montana State can't shoot the 3. That doesn't hurt them here because, and it takes away a strength of Kansas State, their 3-point defense. Well, Montana State can't shoot the 3. That's their weakness on offense. They need to get into the lane. They need to get to the line. They need to get to the rim. And you can do that against Kansas State, who I think is a vulnerable 3 and just not the same team away from home. I think Montana State might be a live dog that not a lot of people are talking about compared to some of the other ones we'll get to, including Oral Roberts. And then bottom half, Michigan State takes on USC, and then Marquette against Vermont. Jim, what sticks out to you in the bottom half of the East region?
I'm not big on USC, so I like Michigan State quite a bit there. You've got the Tom Izzo angle that I'm sure will get beaten to death, but it's more that they have a rock solid backcourt. Tyson Walker, AJ Hoggard. Hoggard had the weird little spat with Izzo in the Big Ten tournament. I'm not sure if you saw that, but he basically was like rolling his eyes as Izzo lectured him. It was really weird, but it's still a very veteran team with good guards. Joey Hauser's a real matchup problem. I don't know if USC has the versatility up front to deal with him being able to go inside out, but I like Michigan State there. If it's going to be right around, I think I saw -1, -2, very, very short spread there. I like the Spartans. I think they match up well against USC.
And then if you had to take a team, like, I mean, Marquette, maybe Vermont can be, they can shoot they can shoot, which is what you want from an underdog. They're not going to turn it over. Maybe they can at least stay within the number against Marquette. Kentucky has a ton of talent. Providence has just been plummeting and going in the wrong direction. Kansas State, I think, is vulnerable. I mean, who comes out of this region? BJ, I'll start with you. Of just the bottom half first.
Yeah, I guess by default it has to be Marquette, even though I don't really love it that much. Like, I agree with you. I love Montana State against Kansas State. Like, Montana State is top 10 in the nation in points per possession allowed at the rim, which Kansas State's the third highest frequency team shooting at the rim. So all the other things you mentioned is just a tremendous matchup for the Bobcats.
Kansas State turns it over. Kansas State they can turn Kansas State over too.
And Kansas State's like 300th in free throw rate allowed, and Montana State is 5th in the country. So it's a really, really good matchup for the Bobcats. And yeah, I guess like the question is Marquette have the easiest path of any 2 seed in this tournament? Because by default, I think they do. Like, I'm not big on Michigan State or USC, Kentucky or Providence, both 2 teams I can't really figure out. And then Kansas State being vulnerable, I guess by default, it is Marquette, even if I think they're a little bit overseeded and I don't love them. So, yeah, I mean, I'd say this bottom half of this, this region is probably the worst of, a region of four matchups of anything in the tournament.
Yeah, big Montana State, very experienced team. I'm a big fan of Danny Sprinkle and one of their best players, Jubril Bello. This is the second highest post offense as far as frequency, out only behind Purdue in the country. They run a lot of their stuff in the post. They need to get to the rim. They need to get to the line. You can do those things against Kansas State. Jim, do you think Montana State's live, and who do you see coming out of this region? Marquette's the most reliable team here. Kentucky probably has the highest upside. What do you see here?
I'm taking Marquette. I think they're really good. They're so fun to watch. So maybe I'm being influenced by their ball movement and how aesthetically pleasing their brand of basketball is. But Kai calls them the most connected team in the country, my cohort. And I think that it is a fair assessment. They play really well together. And the defense actually trended up. It was top 50 in February. That was always kind of the Achilles heel for them. But they're starting to actually really defend. That's how you win 3 games in 3 days at Madison Square Garden. I fully trust the offense. So I'll be on Marquette to win there. Regarding Montana State, yeah, I liked them last year, but they got like the worst possible matchup against Texas Tech's interior defense. It was like a total problem for a team that likes to play through the post.
Because they couldn't shoot that either, right? Yeah.
Yep. This year, it's actually a much better matchup. So I'm definitely liking the Bobcats, and both of you put it very well and pretty much talked me into betting it.
Yeah, the top half. If Duke could get by Oral, I think they're going to get by. I think a lot of people are going to have Louisiana upsetting Tennessee. I don't see it. Louisiana has to run their, they have a high 3-point shooting percentage, but it's not a great jump shooting team. They want to run everything through Brown in the post. I don't think that's really going to work against Tennessee. I don't see that as an upset. It might be trendy though, just because people want to fade Tennessee. But I do think that if Duke gets by Oral, then Duke would get by that winner. But that's another conundrum there. Oral can certainly upset Duke. Jim, do you know who you're going to have coming out of this region in the Final Four yet?
Marquette. I want to pick the winner of Memphis or FAU because I really believe in both those teams, but Marquette's a little simpler, less risk involved. I don't have to have 2 of them going head to head in the beginning. So I'll be flying with the Golden Eagles, and they're obviously quite familiar intimately with playing in New York, and that's where that bracket is. So it's another slight little advantage for the Golden Eagles.
Yeah, you'll have some good Michigan State fans travel. Kentucky fans obviously travel better than anybody. You have Providence there. see, there's some good fan bases here, and then obviously Duke. Yeah, I want to take Memphis to go to the Final Four, but I don't know if I'm ready to take a team that's laying 2 in the first round to go to the Final Four yet. BJ, you're going to take out of this to go to the Final Four?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Marquette as well. I think just by process of elimination, obviously Purdue is very vulnerable. I love Montana State against Kansas State. I like Oral Roberts against Duke. I think Tennessee is very vulnerable as well. So by process of elimination, obviously Marquette is still a very, very good team, and I think they are the best team in this region, but they're the team I trust the most in this region.
Yeah, I will say that if you're in a bigger pool and you want to win it, you want to go against the grain to stand out in at least a region. And I think a lot of people are going to have Marquette. A lot of people are going to have Purdue going down, but a lot of people are probably going to go either Duke or Marquette in the Final Four. Maybe you'll get some Kentucky, but if you want to stand out and take a shot on a surprise Final Four team, this might be the region to do it. I just think that there could be a ton of chaos, especially in the top half. All right, let's stay on this side of the bracket and go to the South Regional in Louisville, Kentucky. Alabama is the 1 seed. The 2 seed on the bottom half is Arizona. But let's start on the top half. Alabama will move on and get the winner of Maryland, West Virginia. If they get to the Sweet 16, they would either take on San Diego State, College of Charleston, Virginia, Furman. Let's start with the bottom half there. College of Charleston, San Diego State is a fascinating tempo clash matchup. And Virginia, Furman is also a tempo clash matchup. Furman wants to run, but they have a really good half-court offense, run 5 out. They can shoot, which I think is good against the pack line. I think Virginia's their offense also was already questionable. And then without Vanderplas, now you have Shedrick in there. They're more defensive-minded, but their offense isn't as good. And that's the concern with Furman, is their defense isn't great. But this is probably a good matchup for them. I think it's going to be a low-possession game. They won't get out in transition because Virginia won't let them. But their half-court offense is also great. Very experienced team, lots of shooters. So I like Furman plus the points. Maybe it's trendy, but and I don't mind feigning the ACC. And I'm having a lot of trouble breaking down San Diego State, College of Charleston, just that complete clash. Jim, what do you think about those two matchups?
Really like Furman. I was fearful of a super athletic, powerful front court facing off against that. That's not Virginia at all. I remember watching
Furman's kind of soft. They're very finesse.
Yeah, they're not big. Like Jalen Slauson is arguably their center, and he's like a 6'7", 210-pound versatile forward. So they can get taken to task on the glass at times, but that Virginia is not interested in that. They're way more concerned about getting back in transition, setting up their defense. They're not going to be all over the glass against Furman. And like you said, they can shoot over the top of the pack line. I wrote this up in our instant reaction file. I like Furman quite a bit. I thought it would be more like 6-7, but 5 it is. I'll take that. I'll be sprinkling the money line there as well. Charleston, San Diego State, again, I feel a little short, and I think people are in love with Charleston because of the fun style they play and how deep they are. I will probably be going Aztecs in that one. I think they're more of the physical team that can dominate the paint, unlike Virginia, the favorite that actually has that kind of athleticism. And their offense actually has juice this year with Ledee and with Trammell coming in via the transfer portal. They've gotten a lot better on the offensive end. So I like San Diego State there. Against Furman in the next round, I'll probably keep rolling with the Aztecs. I think it's a bad matchup for Furman.
Yeah, San Diego State is the exact team that Furman doesn't want to play. Physical, just grind you down, and they can, get after on the glass. And yeah, I agree with you there with San Diego State. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that worries me is Charleston they're going to come at you. They're very deep, and they're not a great 3-point shooting team, but they shoot a ton of threes, and they have just a couple guys who can just get red hot all of a sudden, right? Like if Rain Smith or Larson, like they have a couple guys that just go on these streaks from 3, and then so it's very high variance. So they're going to shoot a ton of threes, and you're going to have to shoot a ton of threes against San Diego State, whose perimeter D is really good too. And then you have the Matt Bradley factor. Is he on or off? Because sometimes if he's just off shooting a ton. So that's kind kind of concerns me about that game. It's very high variance in nature. BJ, any thoughts on the top half in the South?
Yeah, the San Diego State Charleston, you guys hit the nail on the head. San Diego, I mean, it's the clash is so fascinating because not only do you have a clash of tempos, but obviously San Diego State is allowing under 30% from beyond the arc. They're also eighth in the country in open 3-point rate allowed. So really, Charleston's going to have to get so hot from 3-point range with just hands in their face all game long. And the flip side of that, with San Diego State, it's a lot of mid-range jumpers, obviously a lot of post-up sets. Can Charleston defend that? I'm not so sure. So I'm with Jim that I really do like San Diego State in that first matchup. They might shoot themselves out of the game, but their defense is just so good. And I think that it'll be able to match up really, really well with Charleston. That Furman game, yeah, it's very, very interesting. Obviously, Furman takes a ton of 3-point shots, but like they're the number one team in the country in 2-point field goal percentage, and Virginia doesn't have Vanderpleas. So I think you hit the nail on the head, Stuck, that I think they'll be able to shoot against that pack line defense. And yeah, Furman's going to be very, very trendy, but I think they're absolutely live against Virginia.
Yeah, low possession. Virginia plays low possession games too, which obviously makes the underdog more intriguing. With
2 years ago, Ohio was super trendy against Virginia, and they won. Like it just because it's trendy doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah, that was my favorite pick of that first round. I think it was a 13-4 too. And Jim, West Virginia, Maryland. I mean, West Virginia, interesting, intriguing regional matchup. Maryland hasn't done much away from home, but West Virginia, they need to score by getting to the line, getting on the offensive glass, and still in a way, they don't really press as much and pressure as much, but turning teams over. Maryland on paper, pretty good rebounding team, don't really foul, and don't turn the ball over. Do you trust Maryland here? Do you trust West Virginia? What do you see in that matchup? And then most importantly, can either one of those teams give Alabama problems or anybody in the top half of the region, or is this a Bama walkthrough?
I think it's probably an Alabama walkthrough, at least to the Elite Eight. I'm not very scared of Virginia. Maybe San Diego State can bug Alabama with their athleticism and defensive size. But in that 8-9 game, I already bet West Virginia. I laid it with them. I'm not a fan of Maryland if they're not in College Park. It's been a repeat consistent trend all season. I know they've had some competitive efforts, like the at Purdue road effort was good, but if you're going to sit there and cite the November neutral site game against Miami as evidence that they're this like good team away from home, I don't buy that. We didn't see it all through the Big Ten, and I'm overall kind of skeptical of a lot of the Big Ten teams entering this tournament. It's been another couple of years trend where the teams that come out of that league aren't really ready for the big dance and end up crashing out early. So yeah, I took West Virginia. I hope Eric Stevenson makes threes. Seems like whenever I bet on them, he's 0 for 10, but I'm riding with the Mountaineers there.
All right, then moving on to the bottom half of the region. Creighton is the 6th seed against NC State. You have Baylor against UC Santa Barbara, Missouri against Utah State, and Arizona against Princeton. I'll start with my thoughts here. I think Creighton should score at will against NC State, whose defense has issues in the half court, and they want to press. They press about a third of the time, one of the highest rates in the country. Creighton, 99 percentile press offense. You can't press Creighton. So I don't know how NC State's going to get many stops there. Elsewhere, I'm very curious to get your thoughts, Jim, on Missouri or Missouri Tigers against Utah State. Two schools of thought for me here. I think I'm siding with Utah State, but I could see the case for Missouri, just like their athleticism, and they could out physical Utah State and their guards. But on paper, it's okay. Both teams want to shoot a lot of threes. Utah State does a better job of taking away the three than Missouri. Missouri will throw in a lot of different defensive looks. They'll press, they'll zone. Utah State grades out elite against the press, elite against zone. So does it come down to, I think Utah State will have better opportunities to make threes. Now they're going to be at a physical disadvantage, which would be the argument for Missouri. So any thoughts first on Creighton, NC State, and then curious to get your thoughts on Missouri.
Yeah, I think Creighton's similar enough to Clemson that it's a nightmare matchup for NC State. Clemson absolutely pounded NC State 3 times. I think Creighton can do the same thing there. A lot of the drives that Terquavian Smith and Jarkel Joyner go for are going to run into Kalkbrenner at the rim. That's a real problem for them. And NC State can't move him around the way like Villanova did. Eric Dixon would step out and stretch the floor, pull Kalkbrenner away from the rim.
Yeah,
it's not something DJ Burns is going to do. So I don't love that matchup for NC State. As for Mizzou, Utah State, the concern is that Mizzou gives up a ton of threes, like a lot. And because they gamble, they're going for steals. And Utah State is like mega elite at making threes, top 15 nationally in 3-point percentage. I think in the non-conference, they were number 1 for a while. That came down a little bit, but that's the real concern, is that they're just going to get boiling lava hot from deep, because a lot of those shots don't end up contested because of how much Mizzou gambles. The matchup maybe does lean towards Utah State there, but I also think Kobe Brown's going to bully away and have a monster game against that interior defense that's kind of softish. So I think there's a lot of points, BJ. I feel strongest about over in that game than I do either side.
Yeah, it's a very, very intriguing matchup. Like you mentioned, Missouri obviously gives up a ton of 3-pointers. They're not obviously they're one of the worst defensive rebounding teams in the country, but Utah State isn't really. They obviously have the size down there, but their metrics don't really grade out that well against defensive rebounding. But yeah, it's going to come down to is Utah State going to make their shots? I mean, Missouri's. Utah State, if you look at their metrics, they're 248th in open 3-point rate. So that's a positive spin, I guess, for Missouri, because I guess but Missouri on the other end, they're obviously, near the bottom in open 3-point rate allowed. So it's really going to come down to who's making the 3-point shots, I think, in that matchup. But yeah, it's going to be fascinating to watch. I've already bet Utah State. I think that they should be favored by about 2 or 3 points, but Jim, you could convince me either way for your Tigers.
Good.
Well, if Missouri does get by, or Utah State, you have Arizona against Princeton. Princeton, I think, will just sound like a trendy upset because they're Princeton, but they want to run their offense through Tosan. I don't know how you do that against Arizona and their bigs, and they don't have to double or anything. They can stay out on all the shooters. So, and it's going to be a high possession game. I mean, Arizona wants to make that a high possession game, which might not be good for the dog. But when I look at all of the teams in the bottom half, I mean, you have Baylor against Santa Barbara. Baylor's defense is so concerning to me. Jumps off the page. It's like a red flag. I make a chart for all the teams, and then, I highlight in red the teams that just have a glaring issue on one side of the ball, either on offense or defense. And those are teams I just don't take to go far in the tournament. So, like, for example, Virginia's offense, Miami's defense, the Iowa State offense. And when I look at Baylor, their defense is just very, very concerning. From a high level perspective, who could give Arizona issues before they potentially get to Creighton? Because to me, this just looks like it's going to be Arizona Creighton, but maybe I'm underestimating the Baylor guards, which always play in March. Jim, who do you have? Assuming you have assuming you have Alabama coming out of the top half to the Elite Eight, who are you going to go with to match up with the Tide?
I'm going to have Arizona. They've been better in half-court games than I thought, or than they were last year. Last year, if you slowed them down, like they really got frustrated. Houston did it to them. TCU kind of did it to them in the round of 32, and it just derailed their offensive trajectory. This year, they can kind of play in the half-court. They've beaten UCLA twice in really grinding games. They've got arguably the best front court in the country. To beat them, I think you're going to have to make a lot of shots over the top. Obviously, Utah State and Mizzou can both do that, or are willing to do that. But I just think the paint dominance is going to be too much for any of them to handle. And yeah, Creighton, I think, is the big threat there. But I'm not a huge buyer on the Blue Jays. I think the late season surge kind of came up short. We thought they were going to maybe roll into the Big East tournament and put on a big run there. Weren't able to do that. So yeah, I'll be having Arizona through there to face Alabama, probably going with the Tide to the Final Four.
And you just think, Baylor has the guards that have been here, have won a title. And then you throw in George, who's going to be an NBA draft pick. You just don't trust their defense this year? Is that it?
Yeah, they switch everything with small guards. So they get in terrible matchups constantly. They have big guys on driving guards, and then there's no one protecting the rim behind them. I don't love what their defensive game plan has been, to go with the fact that the personnel really isn't that stout either. So their defense is just too much of a limitation for me.
BJ, any thoughts on who you're going to inevitably have come out of this region?
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be the chalkiest one where I'm just going to have Alabama and Arizona State or Arizona, excuse me, Arizona come out of this region. I just don't see any teams getting problems. Like, yeah, if Utah State or Missouri gets hot from 3-point range, then, you can make a case that they could beat Arizona. But yeah, I mean, this is a really, really stout offense that is really running really good half court offense right now. The Baylor thing, what's fascinating about them is that they cannot, like, they're very good at preventing teams from getting the rim. I think they allow one of the lowest percentage of shots at the rim, but once teams get there, they're allowing 72% on field goal attempts at the rim. So facing a team like UC Santa Barbara, where that's where they want to run their offense, I think they're top 40 in rim frequency. Like, that's a terrible matchup for them. So they could definitely be on upset alert in the first round as well. But yeah, I think this is going to end up chalky. I agree with Jim. Like, San Diego State probably presents the biggest matchup problem for Alabama, but I mean, the Tide just have such an elite defense that I struggle finding a case for San Diego State's offense to thrive against them. So it's probably going to end up chalky for me. I'll probably end up taking Alabama to make the Final Four over Arizona.
Yeah, it's interesting. Creighton they're a great transition defense. They're 9th percentile in the country in post D, which could end up being their downfall against Arizona. 9th percentile, and they're 79th percentile as far as frequency. It's a big sample size. I was shocked to see that, because you always think like Kalkbrenner, the way to get them is to draw them out, but they have struggled defending the post. There's just something about Arizona where, like, do I trust, like, is Kriisa going to shoot them out of a game? Their guards just sometimes just disappear. And I also worry about, because it was just, to me, when they were playing UCLA, and UCLA had no bigs left, and like they just couldn't figure it out. It was very bizarre to me. But I also really worry about, just if it's a tight game and you're fouling Ballo and he's just going to the line and bricking free throws, that is a bit concerning to me as well. But this does look to me like the chalkiest bracket, or region, I should say. All right, let's move on to the Midwest, where Houston is the top seed. We'll start in the top half of the Midwest, the Kansas City Regional. They'll start with Northern Kentucky, and that line has come down since open. I think -21 down to -9. I mean, I think Houston profiles as a team that they just blow out these teams that they're superior to, and they're playing a zone here. They're going to get a trillion. My first tweet was, when this match came out, they're going to get a trillion offensive rebounds playing a zone, and Northern Kentucky's got to make threes on their man offense is pathetic. So, like, I don't know how they score. There's the Sasser question, which is certainly worth talking about. Houston looks like a team that I would lay up to 20 with, and then they're going to get the winner of Iowa, Auburn. Jim, any thought? Would you lay it with Houston? I feel like they're just such a good, in the first round. I think they've done well in this spot.
Yes, and like you said, they're going to get 1 million offensive rebounds. Cleveland State got like 60 offensive rebounds in 3 games against this Northern Kentucky zone. It's a serious issue. And like, whether Sasser goes or not isn't that big of a deal to me in this one, because I think they have plenty of perimeter defenders to handle the NKU guards. They're kind of just like a shot-making offense. They take really tough shots and expect the zone to hold up on the other end. I don't think it will against Houston's physicality. And the Horizon team gets pummeled every single season. Like, Wright State, going back when they got smashed by Tennessee. Last year, Wright State got obliterated by Arizona in the round of 64. It's just not that strong of a league, and I think Houston will blow them out there.
Yeah, Northern Kentucky can, if you look at their offensive splits, they are decent against zone, right? They're going to shoot a lot of threes. They have some shooters. They're in like the 70th percentile in zone offense. And you see some zones in that league. They're in the 16th percentile in offense against man-to-man. Well, you're not going to see any zone against Houston. And they are 333rd in defensive rebounding rate. That is a recipe for disaster against Houston. Threes are either going to go in or they're going to get the offensive rebound and dunk it. Like, that's going to be every single possession of that game. It's just a matter of, are they getting 3 or 2? So yeah, I think, and then Houston coming off that loss against Memphis, right? I think that they'll be refocused after that, a little angry. So, and there was reports that Sasser was going to play, and and it just makes no sense to play him. You knew you were going to be a 1 seed. It's a groin. So I think that there's probably a better than, maybe they hold him out again, just saying like, hey, it's a matchup we're going to win regardless. But yeah, I like Houston there.
One other point on that is 2 years ago, Houston was a 2 seed, played a Horizon team, Cleveland State, that couldn't rebound in the first round. DeJon Jarreau got hurt, played only 1 minute. Houston still won by 31. They grabbed almost 50% of their misses in that game. I think it's going to be a very similar script in this one.
Yep, agreed. One of my favorites of the first round. BJ, Iowa, Auburn, meeting up in the first round. 2 teams you can't trust, especially away from home. And now they're going to meet
for Auburn, Stuckey.
It's a home game for Auburn?
Yeah, this game's in Birmingham. Yeah.
Well, it's still not in the jungle.
Yeah.
So do you like, first of all, what were your thoughts on Iowa's draw? You couldn't have been too happy getting the 8 with Houston and playing Auburn in Birmingham.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, we were going to be an 8 or 9 seed, so it's not a great draw. Iowa's been an underrated team throughout a lot of the year. Obviously, the defense has been really, really bad, and that showed against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. But, the thing about it is I think Iowa profiles pretty well against Auburn, who are very reliant on Wendell Green. Tony Perkins is a fantastic guard who can match up well against him. So I like the first round matchup here for Iowa. It's sitting around a pick 'em, so I'll probably be on my Hawkeyes here. But
Shocker.
I mean, for Houston, I mean, by the way, they put all 3 Iowa teams in the same region, which I thought was interesting. So maybe Iowa will play Drake in the Sweet 16. But no, I think this I think Houston, depending on the status of Sasser, my guess is he's probably going to play. I think Houston has a pretty easy draw here to the Elite 8. I mean, we'll see. Obviously, Iowa and Auburn can present problems for them, and Houston has been going through the American Conference for a long time now with not a lot of great offenses. I mean, Memphis is the only offense above the top 50 in adjusted offensive efficiency. So, a team like Iowa who can really, really score can present some problems here for Houston. But yeah, I hope the Hawks can at least get to the second round. I don't think we've made it to the second round, past the second round since I've been alive. So
yeah, I don't trust Iowa. I mean, Iowa's defense is one of those red flag, right? They're 167th in adjusted efficiency. And I think Iowa's way too soft for Houston. Like, Houston just bully them.
Houston had 22 offensive rebounds against Memphis today. And
Houston would just bully them into oblivion.
Yep.
Now Auburn, so I don't trust the Iowa defense, but I also don't trust the erratic guards of Auburn away from home. And Auburn can't shoot well enough to beat Houston, I don't think. So, Jim, any thoughts on that matchup? And you don't see any of these teams posing a threat to Houston, do you?
No, I don't. Auburn, I think, is going to have the rude awakening of going from the SEC where no one can shoot to Iowa, who is like super lethal offensively and can actually hit perimeter jumpers. That could be a problem for them. But yeah, Houston Sweet 16 for me, for sure. I'm not that worried about either one of them.
Yeah, and I legit don't know who's going to win that game. All right, now let's go to the bottom part of the top half of the Midwest Regional. This is the most fascinating little pod, I think, of the entire bracket. Miami takes on Drake. Miami, the 5 seed against Drake, the 12 seed. We don't know Amir's status, but we were texting about this, Jim, and I was tweeting about it a couple weeks ago about Drake. They were going to be my Cinderella coming in. The 12 seed, I was saying, who's the 5 seed? And I was like, please don't let it be TCU. And we were like, just give them to one of the ACC teams. Well, we got it. And I mentioned Miami's defense jumps off the page as one of those major red flags. Drake, one of the most experienced, the oldest team as far as raw age. Penn was starting for Siena in 2017. he was starting games. I love this Drake team. They're finally healthy in March, peaking at the right time. Miami has guards, but I just think they have too many defensive issues. And then you have Indiana, Kent State. This is a bad matchup for Indiana because Kent State can defend. And this, look, Sincere Carry, too, can get really hot. He can give that perimeter defense of Indiana some trouble. This is two bad draws for the 4 and the 5 seed. I wouldn't be shocked if you ended up, there's always the one section where you get like a 12 versus a 13. I wouldn't be shocked if you see that here. I'm more confident in Drake, and I think I might have Drake going to the Sweet 16. Jim, what do you see in this? I think this is a fascinating little pod where it could be chaos. I don't know how to crack it.
Yep, agreed. I thought the Indiana line would be a little higher, but they're like
come down to 4.
4-point favorite over Kent State. That is no bargain for the Golden Flashes, but I still lean that way. They can do some similar things to what Kennesaw State did to IU before Christmas. A lot of slash and kick, hit perimeter jumpers, go over the top. They can do that, and they're also really stout in the paint. They have different options to throw at TJD, so you got some fouls to use in there. Chris Payton's become a total monster. I think he's going to get most of the TJD assignment, but Kent State, look what they did at Gonzaga, at Houston, played really, really close with both those teams, almost pulled off the upset outright in both instances. I think they're going to hang around with Indiana the whole way and have a chance to win down the stretch.
And do you agree with Drake over Miami?
Yep, especially if Omir's out. Jim Larinaga was on CBS earlier kind of bemoaning their lack of toughness without him. They got killed on the boards by Duke without him. If he's not able to go, and it sounds like he's day-to-day per Larinaga, I don't know. It was a bad-looking injury. Drake is just like a fantastic giant killer too. You got a star, plus you've got multiple playmakers and an actual true size with Brody. I think Drake is one of the best underdogs in the tournament.
Yeah, and then I completely agree with that. Anyone on this top half of the bracket, I do kind of. I mean, Kent State went to Houston, lost 49-44. They scored 2 points the final 10 minutes of the half in the first half, and they lost by 5 at Houston. And granted, that team can defend. I kind of do wish they still had Santiago just as another shooter who can get hot, although he did absolutely nothing. He played 33 minutes against Houston and scored 0 points and had 4 fouls. That was his stat line against Houston. But are you having Houston come through here to the Elite Eight, or because I think you have, if you're filling out a bracket, you have to do that just because Indiana could lose to Kent State, Miami Drake could go either way. I mean, I'm gonna have Drake going to the Sweet 16. I don't know if they have enough to beat Houston, but from a bracket perspective, you going Houston chalk here to the Elite Eight.
Yeah, I don't know if I shouldn't spoil it, but Houston's my champ. I'm going to stubbornly stick to this is the best team in the country narrative, and I think Sasser will be good to go. It seemed like he was close enough to playing today, and is more preventative. So I'm comfortable with Houston getting through there. You mentioned that Kent State game. If I'm remembering right, Houston had the flu big time, and that was part of why that game was super close. And Kent State hung around. So yeah, I'll have the Cougars going all the way to Houston, where the Final Four is.
8 for 46 from 3 combined in that game. BJ, any thoughts on your Drake's kind of local? Are you riding with Drake here? Any thoughts on Indiana, Kent State?
I live in the beautiful city of Des Moines, Iowa, so they are very, very local for me. I mean, the line has obviously come down. They were 3.5. Now they're down to 2.5. A lot of books, but it's
keep going.
Yep, it's a fantastic match for them. Like if Amir's out, then Brody is just going to dominate down low. They're a tremendous defensive rebounding team, which takes away an advantage for Miami, and they can defend down low, which is where Miami gets most of their points. So they have the guards to match up against them. Just a really, really well-drilled, sound team. Really just – I mean, that MVC championship game against Bradley, they just demolished them in every area. So, I agree with you guys that this could be one of those, Drake versus Kent State in the second round to see who goes to play Houston in the round of 16.
Yes, since if you look on Torvik, since February 1st, which gives you a good gauge of how these teams are playing on the stretch. Drake is an overall adjusted efficiency. They are 23rd, and Miami is 39th. So over the past 2 months, Drake overall or post month and a half, I should say. Yeah, I really like Drake there. All right, let's move on to the bottom part of the Midwest Regional. You have Iowa State takes on the winner of Mississippi State, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh can't defend, but Mississippi State can't score. I don't know what's going to happen in that game. But if Mississippi State advances and plays Iowa State, I mean, what's the total? 97? And then you have Xavier Kennesaw State. Kennesaw State, really interesting team, very experienced. Abdur Rahim, amazing what he's done. They have, they'll throw out a lot of different defenses out there. They pressure you. Their guards, they need to get into the lane, and they need to get to the line. They need to get to the rim. And I think that they can potentially do that against Xavier. Now, they don't make a lot of free throws once they get to the line, which is a concern, but it's more of an issue when they're a favorite more so than a dog. So Kennesaw State might be a little live here. I mean, it's hard to trust Iowa State, Mississippi State, or Pittsburgh to come out here and get to the Sweet 16. How are you seeing this little pod, Jim?
Confusion. That's what I'm seeing. I don't trust really any of the four teams there. Like you said, Kennesaw might be the one I trust most, but it's just there's still a little bit of a talent gap. I wrote this up in our quick reaction too, where they can actually score with Xavier. You have to be able to score because Xavier's offense is always going to be capable of putting up points in a hurry. But Kennesaw has a lot of different weapons and impressively played up, like I said, against Indiana back in December, hung around like that entire game. The final margin, I think, is not indicative. And there were a bunch of IU free throws there at Assembly Hall. But I think Kennesaw is going to at least give Xavier a scare. And then, man, I might end up going with Iowa State. I was hoping they'd be one of the teams matched up with an awesome 12 seed, and I'd pick the upset. But their draw is ideal for them. I think they can compete with Xavier, and even if Xavier goes down, then Iowa State might be in the Sweet 16 again, just like last year.
Yeah, you don't want to press. Like Kennesaw's capable of throwing out a lot of different defenses. You don't want to press Xavier, but you can zone them. Their zone offense, it's only 152 possessions, but their zone offense, 38th percentile, whereas their man is just elite. So you might see Kennesaw throw out some zone here. BJ, I assume are you fading Iowa State as I expect you to do?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much.
Just give me whoever the team is.
Yeah,
they're
just give me whoever they're playing every single game. No, this, their offense, they obviously have turnover issues. So if they have to face a team that gives them some pressure, that presents a problem. But I'm most interested in, and this is probably going to be the worst viewing game of the entire tournament, but this Texas A&M Penn State game is just absolutely fascinating to me because on one hand, you have a Penn State team who's just completely reliant on jump shooting. They've gotten out of the basement. I think they're third to last in both offensive rebounding percentage and free throw rate. They obviously they're a very good, jump shooting team. But though, Texas A&M, they struggle on the offensive glass and they struggle allowing teams to the free throw line. And they're halfway decent depending from the floor. But again, it's the thing is all right, when you come out of the SEC where teams can't make a jump shot, does Penn State just run away with that? And then the flip side is that Texas A&M, well, they're a terrible jump shooting team, and they completely rely on offensive rebounds and getting the free throw line, which Penn State does a very good job defending. So it's a very weird type of matchup between both these teams who just play very, very unique styles on offense. But yeah, for me, out of this region, I guess I'll take Texas. I guess the team I trust the most. They're peaking at the right time. Colgate obviously presents some problems if Colgate can get hot, but we'll see. But yeah, if I had to pick a team from out of here, I guess it's Texas.
Colgate can't defend. They're going to be
you just can't.
Athletic disadvantage here. I don't think they have any shot against Texas. Colgate, they could shoot threes. They have a kid who's shooting at over 50% on 150 attempts. So they have a lot of guys who can shoot the three. They run really good motion offense, but they can't defend and they have no athletes. It's once they step up in class, it's a different story. This isn't the Patriot League. Texas should just swarm them on defense and they could score at will. Texas A&M Penn State's a really interesting handicap. I love Penn State here. Look, some more magic with Penn State as a 10 seed. they're going to be the 10 seed again. But you mentioned it, Texas A&M, and Jim, you alluded to it too. SEC team that benefited from being in a league of teams that can't shoot. And the way that Texas A&M plays, aggressively helping under screening, they give up a ton of 3-point looks. A lot of teams can't make them. Well, Penn State's top 10 in the nation in 3-point attempt rate and 3-point make rate, right? They have their 5-man is a guy who can shoot 6'6" and step out and shoot the 3. What does Texas A&M need to do to score? They need to get fouled and get to the line. You have games where they go 40. Penn State doesn't foul. And then they need to get to on the offensive glass. Well, Penn State, really good defensive rebounding team. And Penn State doesn't get any offensive rebounds. They don't get to the line. They want to slow the game down. And Texas A&M wants to turn you over. Penn State doesn't turn it over. I think on paper, this is a perfect matchup for Penn State. It's going to kind of be like a shock to the system of Texas A&M. I mean, you saw with Bama, when Bama's making threes, they get run out of the gym. So I really like this matchup for Penn State. Two really good coaches, but Penn State that'll have really good game plans here. But I just think the shooting of Penn State's a bad matchup. They don't turn it over. They're good on the defensive glass. Jim, do you agree here with Penn State?
Yeah, I love Penn State there for all the reasons you guys both listed. My one worry with it is that Dexter Dennis might be like the perfect defender for Jalen Pickett. Like, he can kind of handle the physicality, the bully ball that he does in the post. He's a fantastic defender. He's, I think, American Defensive Player of the Year last season, and he's just a wrecking ball on that end. If he's able to limit Pickett 1v1 and maybe the open looks aren't there quite as much from him spraying the ball around, that would be a concern. But overall, I just think it's going to be such a shock to the system for Texas A&M to go against a team that can shoot like Penn State can.
Yeah, and you don't think Colgate can give Texas a game, right?
No, I do not. They played up once this season. It was against Auburn. They lost by 27. Like, I don't think they can handle athletes.
Yeah. Are we sleeping on Texas overall? It's like a team that just dominated Kansas. Their analytical profile looks good, right? You talk about teams adjusted offensive and defensive efficiency. They're at 18 offense, 11 defense, won the Big 12. Are we sleeping on them?
We might be. The version without Timmy Allen looked really, really good in the tournament. They went a little bit bigger, playing a lot more Adisu. He was a wrecking ball in that event. I kind of think that I'm underselling them as well. It's just a team that I thought would tail off after the Beard news broke and he wasn't on the sideline anymore. I don't fully trust Rodney Terry, but they've been nothing short of fantastic. And it seems like a little bit of maybe addition by subtraction without Allen. They were so good in Kansas City.
But he's going to play, right?
I think so. I think he's supposed to.
They said he was going to play if it was a tourney game. Okay. So I have Texas. They just said like they're not going to risk it. They wanted to be precautionary. I have Texas coming out of the bottom half. So I'm going to go. Yeah, I think I'm going to go a little more upset base in the West and the East, and in the South and the Midwest, I'm going chalky. So I'm going to have Houston against Texas in the Elite Eight. If we get to that matchup, I mean, Texas has tough shot makers in the mid-range. Could they give Houston a game? That'd be a hell of a game. Jim, I know you have Houston coming out of there. I might go Texas, but I think it'll be a really good game regardless. BJ, who are you going to come out of the Midwest?
I'm going to have Houston narrowly edging Texas in the West, which is going to be very chalky as well. But yeah, I just don't see either any teams presenting problems for either of those two before we reach the Elite Eight.
All right, let's go one favorite bet, and then we'll give out our preliminary way subject to change. We're going to be staring at this bracket and matchups the next couple of days. And like I said, we're going to have a preview podcast for all Thursday's games, another one for Friday games. So make sure you check those out. But let's go favorite bet. I'm going to go with Drake. Talked about it. Give me the points here. I wouldn't be shocked if Drake closes a favorite, depending on Amir News to like Drake -1. It's what that game closes at. So I'll take the points with Drake. BJ?
I'll go Montana State against Kansas State. I just think their ability to get to the rim and defend at the rim as well against a Kansas State team that's basically where all their points come from is a fantastic matchup. for them. And I think this Kansas State team is pretty vulnerable when they have to rely on jump shooting.
Another really good coaching matchup. We have a lot of good matchups of like two really good coaches. Jim?
Houston for me, first half and full game. I'll be on both. They're an awesome first half team, and we went through all the matchup advantages they have over that Northern Kentucky team. The one shortcoming there is it's not going to be a high possession game. Should be pretty slow with the way Northern Kentucky plays, but I think there's going to be a gulf in efficiency gap between the two. Houston will just mercilessly kind of pummel them. Might be kind of a crock potting where they end up winning by 30.
Yeah, it's a good game to get some halftime too, because Northern Kentucky's 358th in adjusted pace. Houston's 343. So it's like they dominate, but they're up like 23 with a minute and a half to go, and then you're sweating like the reserves and then a couple 3-pointers. It could be a frustrating loss, but I think a good way to go about it is to have some halftime as well. All right, let's go preliminary Final Four. Well, this is a bracket show, so let's take one 13 seed or lower with the best chance of getting to the Sweet 16. So you can't, because I didn't say 12 because I would have went with Drake. I'll start while you guys look. I'm not in love with any of the 13s outside of Furman. I would like Furman against Charleston, but not against San Diego State. I don't like Louisiana's matchup against Tennessee.
I'll say Kennesaw State because I think Xavier is beatable, and I don't like the 6-11 matchup. I'm not big on Iowa State or either of those playing teams. So I'm going to go Kennesaw State. I think the Owls have a chance to make a run.
I'll go Montana State. They could beat I think they could beat Kansas State, and then you just never know what you're going to get with Kentucky or Providence. So why not? BJ?
I'll take Kent State. Just the matchup problems they present against Indiana, and then the potential maybe matchup against Miraless Miami or Drake in the second round would be good for them.
Like that. All right, and then finally to wrap things up, preliminary, subject to change, Final Four. You know, sometimes I do this. I'm like, well, I already have a team in this conference. So I'm going to go TCU. I always stick to my guns with my only preseason future. I'm going to go TCU coming out of the West. I actually like their path. And even though I think the UCLA game will be tough, but they're going to miss Clark, and I'm going to trust him, Mr. Miles. So I'm going to have TCU coming out of the West. For now, I'm going to say Houston coming out of the Midwest. So TCU, Houston. Can I get 4 Texas teams in here? Texas Southern out of the East regional. No. And then I'm going to get crazy. I'm going to go Memphis in the East. And then in the South. For now, I'm going to go Creighton. I'm going to go Creighton, TCU, Memphis. This is a wild Final Four. I might end up changing the Creighton to Arizona just because, their postie is concerning to me. Yeah. I'll go Arizona. Arizona, Memphis, TCU, and Houston. Subject to change. Jim?
Houston, Alabama, so 2-1 seeds, and Marquette, and joining you on TCU. Let's go Horned Frogs. I'm just going to believe until I can't believe anymore, until the train fully goes off the tracks.
Who do we want to see, Arizona State or Nevada, or does it matter?
Arizona State. I'm not
Arizona
worried about that team.
Shoot.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that first round matchup? Arizona State, Nevada? We didn't talk about that.
Nothing terribly profound. I got to look at it more.
BJ, Final Four?
Yeah. My Final Four, I'm going to go
Iowa, not Iowa State.
You know what? I'm actually going to go Texas I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to go Texas out of the Midwest. I'm going to go UConn out of the West. Out of the East, I'll go Marquette. And then out of the South, I'll go Arizona.
All right. There you have it. Yeah, you going all 2 seeds?
All but UCLA.
Yep. All right. Keep in mind, by the way, no national champion has ever lost their first conference championship game. Before Baylor won, every single conference champion since the bracket expanded in 1985 got to the semis of their conference tournament. Then there was like a bunch of tweets about it, and then Baylor lost and then won it all. So just a little nugget to keep in mind. But there you have it. Thanks to Jim and BJ for joining me. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. We'll have much more content throughout the week. Make sure you subscribe, leave a review, tell a friend, tell an enemy. 5-star reviews really help us out. We'll do giveaways later in the week. Thanks to our sponsor, BetMGM. Thanks to audio and video teams on the back end. Very underappreciated, but we appreciate you and all of your work. Enjoy the madness. Enjoy agonizing over the bracket over the next couple days. We're going to go get to work, break it down some more. We'll see you throughout the week with tons of content. Thanks for tuning in. We'll catch y'all later. Cheers.